Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. Hey, a little more light. I hope you're doing fantastic. I know that Wellness Wednesday took a break last week, and I hope you enjoyed the replay that I put up. And then the week before, the video was about whether or not it's possible to get good at being unhappy. My challenge that week to all of you was to every single day write down one good thing or find one good thing in the day, write it down, share it, practice it, whatever. Because what we ultimately ended up talking about when it came to getting good at being unhappy is gratitude and looking for the positive. Kind of surrounding that episode, I got this idea to make something for a loved one. And this particular one isn't that box, but it's just a box and it's got a quote or a photo affixed to the top of it. And then I stuck a cube of paper and a couple of pens with some cool sayings on them. And I did a little video about this because I decided to make this one for my VIP group for an annual giveaway I do in there. And now I'm thinking that since this is episode 187, that number 200 is coming up probably sometime in September. And I might give away something like that during that episode for anybody that watches, comments, etc. So you let me know what you think about that, and let me know if you took the challenge to look for something good in every day and write it down or share it or whatever. If you are just stumbling on my page, my name is... Wow, words are hard this morning. See what happens when I take a week off? If you're just stumbling on my page, my name is Donna. I'm a mom, a nana, a girlfriend, a runner, which is where I'm headed when I'm done here, a jazzerciser, line dancer. I'm studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling and on a tiny school break that's almost over already. I started Wellness Wednesday because I've been on a lifelong journey with anxiety and depression and have found that pure wisdom, and meaning, sharing tips and tricks and things that have helped us with others, really sometimes turns us on to new things we wouldn't have thought of or new perspectives we wouldn't have thought of. So it's really kind of important. I did take last week off. Sometimes I just have to take a little brain break because, I was finishing up a term. I was headed into school break. My creativity was, in a downward spiral, and I just needed a little not scheduled time. And sometimes that's important for us. So, but it seems like you all really loved last week's replay. And the cool thing about replays is that they're uploaded videos. And so Facebook doesn't take them down after 30 days like they do live ones. So if you're here, let me know you're here. If you don't see this till afterwards, hit hashtag replay in the comments or ask a question, drop a comment, answer one of my questions, whatever. And then, of course, this episode will be on YouTube later today. So, my personal theme for these past few weeks and possibly my entire life has been trust. It's been an ongoing issue for me on several levels. And if you know me, I can't resist a good opportunity to give a nod to 80s music or movie or some kind of quote. And in this case, our nod today is to Billy Joel. As soon as I settled on this topic, and it wasn't so much that I settled on it, but it kept getting given to me. Once I settled on this topic, I couldn't stop thinking about the song Matter of Trust. So my deep appreciation to the Piano Man, because he really, really spoke a lot in the song A Matter of Trust. He talks about love, but there's a lot of really, really juicy lines in there that talk about trust, and it just seemed to kind of fit with my theme. So you'd be surprised how much trust is related to wellness. And you might ask when I ask the question, what is trust? When you hear the word, what usually comes to mind? Chances are most of us are going to say or think of relationships, betrayal, honesty, and dependability. We're also told a lot by mentors, bosses, coworkers, friends. We're also told a lot to trust the process. Doctors, I mean, that's just it's like a whole phrase that just becomes a thing. And we're told to trust the process. But there's several layers or levels to trust. And this is where I've gotten stuck in a lot of ways. These can look like trusting ourselves, trusting others, trusting our higher power. For me, that's God, and that's a biggie. And trusting the process when we don't know the outcome, because that's, like I said, it's like that catchphrase for trust the process, which can be good sometimes. It can be trust what you've practiced because it's going to come through for you when it's time to use it in real life or whatever. But it can also get a little scary, and that's what we're going to talk about. The thing is that, like I said, there's these layers. There's these trusting others, trusting ourselves. And I kind of went over that quickly the first time, but did you stop and think, wait a minute, what do you mean trusting ourselves? What I've learned over time is that trusting myself is an issue. It's not so much that I have issues trusting others anymore. It's that I have issues trusting myself. And sometimes I have issues trusting my higher power. And that can be, that for me, that's God. For you, that could be anything or anyone else. But when trust is damaged in one area, it often spills over into others. So how do we lose it? Well, we often lose trust when someone lies, when someone leaves, when someone hurts us in other ways, or when things don't turn out the way we expected. We could plan, we could go through that process that we're told to trust, and then the outcome isn't what we expected or what we wanted or anything close to what we thought it was supposed to be. And when I say that, what I hear coming out of my mouth is a lot of expectations and trying to control things, and things that you don't think of as being part of trust. But sometimes we also stop trusting ourselves. And that can be a hard pill to swallow. So, I have a note here that's like, wait, what? Self-trust? This is something I actually learned from a mentor some time ago. But as I've said before, sometimes you have to, and this is why I sometimes may sound repetitive on Wellness Wednesday, because sometimes we have to hear the same thing over and over and over again, but it's got to be the right moment for it to click. And a mentor had said on several different occasions previously to me, or to me in a group also, that sometimes we struggle to trust others because we don't trust ourselves. And it just took the right moment for it to click. And for me, that moment was in this last few weeks while I was struggling to trust the process and trust myself and trust God, is when it really clicked. How many promises, good morning, Miss Diana, how many promises have you made to yourself? Maybe you made a promise that you would quit a habit, that you would lose weight, that you would start walking or go to bed earlier or read more or pray more, stop procrastinating, maybe save money. You can drop in the comments anything else you can think of that you've promised yourself that you have broken, that you haven't followed through on that promise, or you haven't followed through on that thing. See, we think that those things don't matter because those are promises to us. It only matters if we make promises to other people, and we don't keep those. If we make promises to ourselves and we don't keep those, not a big deal, no biggie. Good morning, Miss Heather. But it does matter. Our brain kind of keeps score. We've talked about this before too. Our brain focuses on what we tell it. So when we tell ourselves that we're going to do this thing, or that we're going to make this thing happen, and then we don't repeatedly, here's what happens. We kind of lose motivation because our brain's like, she's not going to do it. Instead of I can or I will, or I'm going to, it becomes, well, I've tried this before and failed. That's a big one for me. Well, I started to do this before. It didn't work. I stopped. I don't know if I can do it again. I don't stick with anything, which is not true. I stick with a lot of things, but these are things that some of us may be thinking also. I'll probably quit, if you're trying to build a new habit or start walking or start running or run a 5K or whatever the case may be for you. that your brain may be telling you, I'll probably quit because you've done it before, or just a why bother. That's not a lack of discipline. That is a lack of trust in ourselves, because we've said we were going to do this before, we were going to quit that, or we were going to start that, whatever the case may be, and we haven't been successful. And so we degrade at our trust in ourselves. And I think a lot of times that spills on to other people, because if we can't trust ourselves, oh my, I hope it's a better day than whatever you've had this morning, Miss Heather. When we struggle to trust ourselves, how easy is it to project that on others, right? If we can't trust ourselves, who can we trust, right? My dad used to say to me, I only trust two people, and that's you and me, and I'm not so sure about me. Or sometimes he would say, and I'm not so sure about you. So he would twist it around a little bit here and there. But it's true. It's not a lack of discipline. It's a lack of trust in ourselves to go through these things or do these things, because we've tried and failed, or we've tried and quit, or whatever the case may be. And that tends to project onto others. So what the Piano Man, Mr. Billy, talks about in one portion of his song, A Matter of Trust, and really I came up with the topic first, and then the song just kind of tied itself to it, and I started it's replaying in my head. But he talks about control. There's one particular verse where he talks about vying for the ultimate state of control, basically. And what happens when we don't trust is that we often try to control, or at least I say we, mostly me probably. I say we because I know I'm not the only one that ends up in these situations or looking at it this way. And that's part of what Wellness Wednesday is all about. So when we don't trust, we often try to control. We try to control outcomes. We try to control people, conversations, schedules, timing, reactions. Because in cases of uncertainty, control feels safer, right? So if we're not certain about what the outcome is going to be, if we're not certain about what somebody else is going to do, if we're not certain about how we're going to respond to something, trying to control that feels safer than trusting it. And we can't control other thoughts. We can't control the way other people think, the way they act. We can't control their responses. We can't control tomorrow or life. So we can either drive ourselves crazy trying to control those things, or we can try to find some trust. And so you might be thinking, what does this have to do with wellness? Well, it has to do a lot with wellness. So I spend a lot of time, and of course, you all know, a lifelong struggle with anxiety and depression. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out everything ahead of time before I can make a decision, which is pretty much a classic example of anxiety. So if I'm trying to figure out everything before I make a decision, and I'm trying to anticipate all of the outcomes for all of the possible scenarios, to make sure that nothing goes wrong and that everything goes the way I want it to, or that I expect it to, so that there's no surprises, I spend a lot of time strategizing. And the most common places I do this are in relationships. And by in relationships, I mean conversations with other people, worrying about what they're going to think of me and what can I say that might control their thought. You know what I mean? It gets down to the nitty gritty. And with finances, how many of us have been in situations where we're struggling a little financially, and so we say we've done the best we can do, and we're going to just let what happens happen, or we're going to let God take care of it, or we're going to let the universe handle it, or whatever your lane is. And then 5 minutes later, we're right back on it, and we're redoing the math. And I just went through this last night with my financial aid, y'all. I just literally, and so we're constantly going back, and we're constantly picking at it and strategizing, instead of trusting that we've done what we can do, and that we've followed the process, and that it's going to be what it's going to be. We struggle with that because we can't see. It's like that bridge in my graphic. We can't see the end, so we struggle to put our foot on the bridge because we don't know what's on the other side. And that is basically the crux, the visual of a trust issue. So As you know, I am a woman of faith, but trusting God has been one of my biggest challenges because, as I said, I got to strategize and I got to obsess and I think I leave something in his hands but then I got to go back and I got to poke at it. And so in the last few weeks, I have had, I won't say I've learned because I always learn that I need to let go of some of this stuff and I need to trust that I've done what I should do to handle it and that the rest is not within my control. However, as much as I always learn, I have to say I keep learning over and over again because I always try to take those things back. And I go back and I poke at things. But in the last few weeks, I did a little better. I did a little better than I usually do. And things just definitely just happened. And this is what people mean when they say trust the process. But a lot of times they're putting that trust in habits that they've built or, a strategy that they've built or a plan. When some of us choose to put that trust in something else. I hope I don't sound like I'm going in circles here. In any case, I don't always trust myself. And I think that often projects onto my relationships, my lack of trust in other people, my lack of trust in the process, and sometimes my lack of trust in my higher power. So when we lose trust, we show it in anxiety, we show it in perfectionism, we show it in fear, we show it in overthinking, people-pleasing, isolation, and pride, like not asking for help, which is one of my biggest areas of struggle. And recently I was trying to carry something myself and I felt prompted to have a conversation with my loved one about it, not because I was looking for them to help me with the decision, but because I needed to speak and I needed to trust somebody else with what was going on in my head so that I could work it out. And once I actually did that, once I spoke it, the decisions were clear, regardless of what their opinion was. And being able to trust someone else enough with what was going on in my head made a huge difference and it took immense pressure off. So, in fact, it was unbelievable the amount of pressure it took off because sometimes we don't understand how much we're carrying when we're full of anxiety and pride and trying to control everything and we're trying to protect ourselves. And in the process, we're trying to carry everything and we're trying to see what's at the other end of that bridge before we even put a foot on it. And sometimes that just doesn't work. So how do we, and that's where it becomes, gosh, guys, I'm struggling this morning. You can tell I took a week off. So that's where it becomes part of wellness because when we are anxious, when we are poking, when we are in fear and we're overthinking and we're trying to control every outcome, what does that affect? It affects our wellness. It feeds our anxiety. Sometimes it can feed our depression. And so when we're trying to protect ourselves by controlling everything around us, that is the crux of what shakes the foundation of our wellness. So how do we rebuild it? How do we rebuild trust, whether it's in someone else, whether it's in ourselves? A lot of times it's in ourselves, y'all. That's where it starts. We rebuild it the same way it was built to begin with. And that is with one small decision at a time. That's keeping one promise to ourselves, not 10, one promise at a time. Not, I'm going to do this laundry list of things and then not doing it. I'm going to do this thing for myself or for this person. And I am going to finish it. I'm going to complete it. I'm going to keep this promise to myself. So keeping one promise to yourself, making one small decision, and trusting that it's the right decision, that if it doesn't turn out the way we expect, that we're going to, pivot, or it's going to be just a quick plot twist and we'll figure it out. Trusting that not everything has to go exactly the way we think all the time. And trusting others starts with an understanding that we cannot avoid being hurt. And that it's not always intentional from the other side, whatever that looks like. We can only control how we respond to it. And one of the things we cannot do, we tend to want to penalize others for the sins of their predecessors. And I know I've been guilty of that in my past relationships, because my trust of that person was based on all these others before them. And in our brains, we can rationalize that and it makes perfect sense. But when we're constantly thinking about all these ways that people broke our trust, guess what we start doing? We start questioning, whether it's friends, it doesn't matter if it's intimate relationships, friends, family members, we start questioning our ability to choose, to make decisions, to discern. And so we lose trust in ourselves. And then all of that gets projected on that next relationship, that next intimate relationship, that next friendship, that next conversation with the family member, or that next attempt at an olive branch with the family member. And everything around us ends up paying for the sins of our predecessors. And that's not how we build trust. That is how we cultivate mistrust. So when it comes to trusting others, we have to understand that we can't avoid being hurt, that they're not responsible for what's happened in the past, and that we can only control how we respond and whether or not we project that lack of trust in ourselves or that lack of trust in people before them onto them. And it's a game changer. When I learned to stop comparing and contrasting and projecting all of my previous relationships onto the one I'm in now, wow, what a difference, y'all. What a difference. So then the next step, of course, was for me to start learning to trust myself and to trust my higher power. And trusting your higher power starts with taking the step before you can see the whole bridge. I know for me, I used to demand, before I became a believer, I used to demand proof. And then at some point, I took the leap without the proof, and now I see proof every single day. So that's a whole different process. But that's been a thing for me, and it's not so much that I struggle trusting others anymore, but I struggle with trusting myself, and I struggle with trusting my higher power. And in both cases, it usually means that I have to let go of things that I was never designed to carry or to try to control to begin with. And it doesn't mean that I stop planning, and it doesn't mean that I stop caring about the outcome or doing what I can do. It means that I'm learning to stop trying to control things. Isn't that funny how this whole trust conversation turned more into a control conversation? In any case, I hope some of that made sense to you. I hope some of that resonated with you. A lot of times, as I said in the beginning, when we think trust, we think about others. We don't think in terms of whether or not we trust ourselves. We don't think in terms of whether or not, if we're people of faith, whether or not we trust in our higher power. And again, I can't iterate enough. Whatever your higher power is, that is, whatever your lane is, that's totally fine. I'm not here to judge. But when we believe in a higher power, we have to at some point trust that higher power. And sometimes that can be pretty stinking difficult, especially when we don't trust ourselves. So a lot of times what it boils down to is trust is not about others. Trust is about us. It's about what we have taught ourselves and then what we have projected onto others. Do we have legitimate reasons not to trust other people? Absolutely. Are most of those reasons based on the fact that we couldn't control the outcome? It's a good possibility. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. All right, so the challenge I'm going to leave you with for this week is, where have you lost trust in others or yourself or your higher power? And what have you been trying to control because of it? And then I would ask you to choose one small promise that you have continually broken, that you've made to yourself, that you've continually broken, that you can try to keep to yourself this week. If it's just that you've been promising yourself you would do a little act of self-care and you haven't done it, you keep pushing yourself to last. That's a promise you're breaking to yourself. If you promised yourself you would drink 8 glasses of water a day, is that a promise that you can keep to yourself this 1 week? Or for 1 day? Sometimes we got to take it 1 day at a time, right? Hey, Miss Beverly. So that's the challenge I'm going to leave you with. And then remember that trust might not be about whether or not others are trustworthy, but whether we've stopped trusting ourselves or if we're simply trying to control too many things. And sometimes wellness is about learning to loosen our grip and take the step even when we can't see the outcome or the other side of the bridge. And sometimes control is just our attempt to create certainty or a safe place when trust feels unsafe. So I hope you found this helpful. I'm sorry if it seemed a little all over the place this morning, because when I put these together, I have lots of different thoughts and I'm trying to get them all contained in a roughly 30-minute package. But I hope you got something out of this. If you did, please share. Watch, in September. Of course, watch the episodes in between now and then, but watch in September. I'll be doing a 200th episode giveaway, like I talked about at the beginning. And in between now and next week, of course, if you have topics you'd like me to talk about, always feel free to message me. And I'll see if I can work them in. I love to learn new things. So if it's something I don't know anything about, I'll definitely check it out. And in between now and next week, happy Wellness Wednesday and be well. Bye.